watching Gravitas. America's approach towards North Korea is not the only bone of contention between Donald Trump and his Secretary of State Rex Tillerson. In fact, in the 300-odd days that Trump has been in office, the two leaders have sparred on several occasions. Take a look.
He's here. Rex is here.
It's laughable.
They may try to deny it, but the growing divide between US President Donald Trump and his Secretary of State Rex Tillerson is out there for the world to see. They have rarely seen eye to eye. Their disagreements have often become public through leaked private conversations, contradictory talking points, and unfiltered tweets by the president himself. In the 300-odd days that Trump has been in office, there have been at least 8 occasions when he and Tillerson have publicly butted heads. When US intelligence agencies claimed Russia had used hacking and political misinformation to influence the 2016 presidential elections, Trump remained unconvinced and said it could have been that a lot of people interfered. Tillerson, on the other hand, was clearly concerned and said he tried to help the Russian government understand how seriously it had damaged the relationship between the US and Russia. In August, a rally by neo-Nazis and white supremacists in Charlottesville, Virginia, took a deadly turn after a counter-protester was killed when a white supremacist drove a car into a crowd. While Trump condemned the incident, he made the now famous claim that there is blame on both sides and that there were very fine people among the far-right protesters. In an apparent effort to distance himself from Trump's comments, Tillerson later said the president speaks for himself. As America's war in Afghanistan drags on, Tillerson and Trump are still divided over whether to continue to try to eradicate the Taliban or shift to a more diplomatic approach. In an address to military personnel in Virginia in August, Trump made his position clear. He said, and I quote, "Our troops will fight to win. From now on, victory will have a clear definition. Attacking our enemies, obliterating ISIS, crushing Al-Qaeda, preventing the Taliban from taking over Afghanistan, and stopping mass terror attacks against America before they emerge." Soon afterwards, Tillerson advocated a different strategy. He said, and I quote, "You will not win a battlefield victory. At some point, we will have to come to the negotiating table and find a way to bring this to an end." While Tillerson advocated for staying in the Iran nuclear deal, Trump went against his Secretary of State's advice and decertified Iran's compliance with the accord. When Donald Trump withdrew from the Paris Climate Accord that his predecessor Barack Obama had signed, the decision did not sit well with Tillerson. Faced with angry allies, Tillerson tried to do damage control by saying the US could remain in the Paris Climate Accord under the right conditions. When Tillerson was tapped to lead the State Department, his relationship in West Asia, forged during his tenure as the CEO of ExxonMobil, was seen as a major asset, and he pushed for the US to take a neutral position in the region. But in June, the president threw his weight behind Saudi Arabia in a series of tweets, where he accused Qatar of funding terrorism, undercutting statements Tillerson had made days earlier. It was the most direct public dispute between the two leaders when Trump disavowed Tillerson's diplomatic approach towards North Korea on Twitter. One day after Tillerson stated that he was going to try to open the door for talks with North Korea, Trump undermined his efforts, tweeting to say, and I quote, "I told Rex Tillerson, our wonderful Secretary of State, that he is wasting his time trying to negotiate with Little Rocket Man." Trump and Tillerson have repeatedly clashed over the proper way to handle North Korea's aggressive stance towards the US. While Trump has been in favor of military action, Tillerson hopes to use back channels to reach a consensus with Pyongyang. Tillerson's frustration and anger with Donald Trump came to a head when, in a private conversation with fellow US officials, an exasperated Tillerson allegedly called Trump a moron. In typical style, Trump said he would be happy to settle the question of his intelligence once and for all and challenged Tillerson to an IQ test. Trump hasn't made Tillerson's job easy, and their differences are visible in the incoherence of America's foreign policy. Bureau Report, Beyond.
Talk about public differences. One is the world's most powerful man. The other is a dictator whose word is law in his country. For several months now, the world has watched with bated breath as Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un have traded insults and threatened each other with dire consequences if the other were to put a foot wrong. Here's a look back at the exchanges between these two leaders.
As the crisis over North Korea pursuing its missile and nuclear programs worsened, sampled Donald Trump's attempt at getting a recalcitrant dictator to the negotiating table. On the 8th of August, after North Korea had test-fired an intercontinental ballistic missile, Trump came out with his now famous tweet. If North Korea makes any more threats to the United States, they will be met with fire and fury like the world has never seen. On the 11th of August, Trump followed it up with this gem, which took the breath out of many diplomats. Military solutions are now fully in place, locked and loaded should North Korea act unwisely. Hopefully, Kim Jong-un will find another path. But this was just the beginning. Breaking new ground in diplomatic protocol, Donald Trump soon followed it up with another tweet. I spoke with President Moon of South Korea last night. Asked him how Little Rocket Man is doing. Long gas lines forming in North Korea. Too bad. To many, Trump's approach resembled so much rhetoric and bluster which would not yield any significant results. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, who has been advocating a more nuanced approach, was indirectly told off by his president, obviously in a tweet. North Korea has interpreted America's past restraint as weakness. This would be a fatal miscalculation. Do not underestimate us and do not try us. Trump brought his personal touch when he tweeted about Kim Jong-un. Short and fat. Why would Kim Jong-un insult me by calling me old, when I would never call him short and fat? Oh well, I try so hard to be his friend, and maybe someday that will happen. Kim Jong-un has never responded through Twitter. Rather, he relied on state-run media and his favorite news anchor, known as the Voice of Death.
North Korea's recent testing of a new, more powerful intercontinental ballistic missile carries with it a message from its leader Kim Jong-un that he will never give up on nuclear weapons, that he sees the security of his regime linked to his nuclear status. In that sense, he will not make the mistake dictators like Saddam Hussein and Muammar Gaddafi did. In 2016, the state news agency of North Korea said that countries that gave up their nuclear weapons could not escape destruction. It said, and I quote, the Saddam Hussein regime in Iraq and the Gaddafi regime in Libya could not escape destruction after being deprived of their foundations for nuclear development and giving up nuclear programs of their own accord. Observers say Pyongyang understands that possession of nuclear weapons is the only guarantee it will not be invaded. Wary of the US and South Korea's intentions, the chances are highly unlikely that Kim Jong-un would give up his nuclear weapons. Clearly, for North Korea, its nuclear program is about maintaining its security and sovereignty, an insurance check, if you will, and probably nothing or nobody can convince it to give them up. For the US to insist on North Korea giving up its nuclear weapons is hypocritical, some would say. Perhaps the US and with thousands of nuclear weapons in its arsenal should set an example by giving up its own first. And any decision to talk to North Korea would be well received in the region, we understand, especially in Beijing and Seoul. Japan can also be expected to go along, given its insecurities about North Korea's missile arsenal. US Secretary of State Rex Tillerson had said that he's ready for talks with North Korea without preconditions. It's being seen as a major advance on Donald Trump's warnings of raining fire and fury on the North, followed by insulting tweets. But pending clarification from Washington about exactly what its policy could be, let's take a look at how some of the prominent actors in this region could react to these developments. China, Japan and South Korea, they've all been closely monitoring developments on the Korean Peninsula, while Donald Trump has in the past accused China of not doing enough to get the North Korean regime to the negotiating table, including stopping the flow of oil. China has not gone beyond some cosmetic measures. In fact, China wants Trump to talk directly to the North.
We hope the United States and the DPRK will go to meet in the middle from different directions, taking meaningful steps for dialogue. China will continue to play a constructive role in promoting peaceful resolution to the Korean Peninsula issue through dialogue and consultation.
China's stand has won South Korea's quiet backing. President Moon Jae-in is currently in Beijing, and the pundits say his diplomacy on the North could well parallel China's. China may push for closer South-North economic ties as a way of reducing tensions and building greater dependencies. It would also mitigate the impact of United Nations sanctions. Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, for one, has sounded tough warnings about North Korea's missile tests that have transited his country's airspace. But he may have no objection if dialogue of some kind can get the North to do less saber rattling.